quiet Colorado home. Her car in the garage. Her purse inside. Her phone still there. Medication left behind. Children's car seats untouched. A pregnant mother who never missed important appointments was suddenly unreachable. A friend knew immediately something was wrong and called for help. Police records document that Shanann had been dropped off around 1:48 a.m., then later could not be reached while her vehicle remained in the garage. Sometimes, danger does not arrive like a stranger breaking through a door. Sometimes it is already inside the house, smiling, answering questions, standing in the driveway, acting concerned. This is not only the story of a man who killed his family. This is the story of how ordinary appearances can hide extraordinary harm. This is the story of the Watts family annihilator case. In our previous episode, we sat with the unresolved grief of Kaylee Anthony's case, where so many questions remain about what really happened to that little girl. This case begins with a similar terror. A mother and her children suddenly missing. A quiet house, belongings left behind, and people close to them realizing something was terribly wrong. But here, the legal ending was different. In the Watts case, the truth surfaced. The victims were found, and Chris Watts was held accountable. Still, justice is not restoration. It can name the guilty. It can punish the crime. But it cannot give Shanann another morning, Bella another year, Cece another birthday, or Nico his first breath. So before we talk about the man who ended their lives, we have to begin with the lives that existed first. Before the trial unintentionally reduced her to a case file, Shanann Watts was a person in motion. She was not simply the wife of Chris Watts. She was a daughter, a mother, a friend, a woman trying to hold together the ordinary pressures that so many people quietly carry. She navigated health struggles. She worked and managed their finances. She maintained relationships and cared for a household. She did all these while being pregnant, carrying another child while planning for their family's future. People who knew her often described her as a person who was organized, energetic, communicative, and someone who deeply loved her family. She documented milestones, routines, celebrations, and the small everyday moments that make a family feel alive. Whatever complexities that existed in her private life, one truth remains clear. She was actively trying to build something. It may have been a home, stability, a future for her little children. I believe we cannot leave this out because many women who are harmed by violence are mostly remembered only through the violence that was done to them. Their names become attached to tragedy, not to the years of effort, personality, humor, stress, hope, and love that came before it. Shanann Watts deserves to be remembered not first through the way she died, but through the life she was trying to create. Before fear entered that house, there was a woman making plans. Before the crime, there was a mother preparing for tomorrow. That before all of the gruesome headlines, there was a human being. Before the world learned about their names through the tragedy, they were children living ordinary childhood lives. Bella Watts was often described as sensitive, gentle, and observant. Even Chris would later describe her as caring, the kind of child who notices when someone seems upset and would ask, "Are you okay?" That small question says a great deal about who she was. Some children move through the world loudly. Others move through it softly, paying attention to moods, face, tensions, and feelings adults think children do not notice. And somehow, Bella appears to have been one of those children. Bella should be remembered not only as a symbol of the crime, but as a little girl whose tenderness existed before the violence ever entered the story. Celeste Watts, or Cece, was remembered very differently, but just as vividly. She was energetic, bold, and constantly in motion. Her father described her as all energy, either moving at full speed or completely asleep. Anyone who has known a child like that knows the feeling they bring into a room. Noise, laughter, chaos, movement, life. Cece represents the kind of joy families appreciate and delight. The running feet in the hallway, the sudden laughter from another room, the exhaustion that somehow becomes a cherished memory later. Cece's presence was loud in the best way children can be, and she should be remembered not only through silence, but through a loud motion. Not through the tragedy, but through her loud energy that once filled the spaces around her. Before the investigations, before the headline and the trial, there were two sisters with distinct personalities. One gentle and empathetic, one bold and bright. They were not characters in a case. They were children. Before the world would ever know his name, Nico was already part of a family's tomorrow. He was still in the womb of Shanann, still waiting to enter our world. But he was not an abstraction, nor just an idea. He had already been named. This is important because a name is often the first act of love given to a child. It means someone imagined you before meeting you. It means someone made room for you in conversations, in plans, in hopes, in the shape of days yet to come. Nico's presence had already been there even before. He existed in appointments marked on calendars, in discussions about the future, in the practical preparations the family is making, in the emotional language of expectation, in the quiet belief that soon someone new would arrive. He was part of tomorrow before tomorrow came. That is maybe why losses like this carry a different kind of sorrow. Some victims are mourned through memories already made, through birthdays, voices, habits, laughter, and photographs, while others are mourned for futures that never had the chance to begin, for the first breaths never taken, for the cries never heard, for the first steps never witnessed, a life loved before it was lived. As for this case, Nico should be remembered not only as an unborn child, but as a future already taking shape in the minds of those who had been expecting him. Before the crime, he was already the child being waited for with love. Before the horrendous ordeal entered that house, there were the kind of days that most families go through on a daily basis. Their mornings might have looked like family urgency, alarms, coffee, backpacks, misplaced shoes, a noisy house where the children are busy playing house, toys left where they don't belong, piles of laundry, lists of groceries to buy, errands to run, and dinners to figure out when everyone is tired. Maybe there were calendars marked by school plans, work schedules, doctor's visits, and the preparation of a coming baby. Like many or probably all households, there might have been disagreements that seemed important in the moment, bills that felt stressful. We're pretty sure that this was not a perfect life, because no family life is perfect. But definitely, it was something far more valuable than perfection. It was ordinary, unfinished, and most especially, it was alive. This might be why loss whacks so deeply. Because violence does not only end lives, it completely erases the quiet future those lives were already building. It takes birthdays not yet celebrated, school photos not yet taken, sibling jokes not yet invented, apologies not yet spoken, and milestones no one knew were coming. Violence steals the chance for children to grow older, for a mother to watch them become themselves, for grandparents to keep loving across generations, for graduation photos to be taken and celebrated. What was destroyed here was not only a family in one moment, but thousands of ordinary Tuesdays that never got the chance to come to pass. By the summer of 2018, the Watts marriage was not simply having problems. It was destabilizing in a way Shanann herself was actively trying to understand. In text messages later reproduced, Shanann told her friend that Chris had said they were not compatible anymore, that he refused to hug her, and that he said another baby would fix his feelings, and that he refused couples counseling, which shows not just distance, but a sudden rejection of affection, repair, and shared future at the same time. She also told a friend that she had cried herself to sleep over a week, which matters because this was not a woman passively missing warning signs, but a woman who is emotionally responding to a marriage that seemed to be changing faster than she could make sense of it. Other case records describe Shanann as telling friends that Chris had been cold, inattentive, and no longer showing love, while she still wanted to try counseling for her kid's sake, which captures the real marital turmoil. One partner trying to interpret, repair, and hold the family together, while the other appeared to be emotionally leaving before he ever physically left. But this is where ethics matter. Many marriages go through emotional withdrawal, rejection, infidelity, pregnancy stress, financial pressure, and painful conversations about separation. Very few end in murder. The point is not to make Shanann's confusion look obvious in hindsight, because real life did not hand her a highlighted case file with the ending circled in red. According to news case summaries, while Shanann was in North Carolina, Chris began seeing Nicole Kessinger and told Kessinger that he was separated and in the process of divorcing Shanann, meaning he was living in two emotional realities at the same time: a husband inside one family and a man privately constructing an exit to another life. To Shanann, the signs may have appeared as just coldness, secrecy, rejection, vague answers, and a partner who no longer felt emotionally present. To us, after the crime, those same signs can look like a straight road to tragedy. But that is the trap hindsight creates. Emotional withdrawal, rejection, even infidelity. These are painful, destabilizing, and deeply human experiences that occur in many relationships. The vast majority do not end in violence. Most end in separation, difficult conversations, custody battles, broken families that still go on living. Which is what makes this case difficult to confront, because it forces a question that does not have an easy or comfortable answer. If leaving was possible, why wasn't it chosen? Why does the common path lead to distance, while another led to destruction? Hindsight arranges scattered moments into something that feels inevitable. But nothing about this was inevitable. Real life does not unfold in clean lines or clear warnings when you are inside it. It unfolds in confusion, in hopes that things might still be fixed, in attempts to understand what is quietly slipping away. And somewhere in that gap, between what was breaking and what could have been chosen, lies the part of this story that is hardest to understand. Shanann Watts had just returned from a business trip to Arizona on August 13, 2018. She arrived home at around 2 in the morning, which was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. By later that morning, concern set in when she missed a scheduled prenatal appointment and could not be reached. Her friend contacted the police. Officers arrived at the house around the same time Chris Watts did, and upon checking inside, found her car and personal belongings still present. But Shanann and the children were missing. When law enforcement entered the home, what they found did not match a voluntary disappearance. Her personal belongings were still there, not just forgotten items, but the essentials of daily life, like her purse, her phone, the medicine for the kids, car seats of the children. Even her car remained at the residence. This is where reality begins to resist the idea of choice, because people can leave, and people do leave. However, they do not leave behind the very things that they cannot go on the day without. This is when it felt wrong almost immediately. At first glance, it may seem like a simple missing persons case, except the details refuse to cooperate with that narrative. Each object left behind tells the same story, that this was not someone going somewhere else. Something interrupted whatever came next. There is a point in every tragedy where everything that comes after becomes inevitable. In this case, it did not begin with noise. It began with silence. In the early hours of August 13, 2018, Shanann Watts returned home from a business trip, stepping back into a house that from the outside looked unchanged. Inside, it wasn't. What existed in that space was not a sudden explosion of violence, but a decision that had already taken shape long before that night. What happened next did not unfold as chaos. It might have unfolded as something far more disturbing, something controlled, intentional, and irrevocable. At some point in those hours, Chris Watts crossed the line that cannot be uncrossed. His wife, pregnant with their son, was unalived inside the home they had built together. There was no struggle that neighbors could hear, no interruption. Just a life ending where it was supposed to feel safest. The graphic details is not important in this episode. It is more of the life that was lost. And then the children, Bella and Celeste, were not strangers to him. They were not distant figures. They were his daughters. One of them, old enough to understand fear, would later be described as asking questions no child should ever have to ask in their final moments. That detail alone reshapes everything. It strips away any illusion of detachment and replaces it with something far more difficult to face. This was not a loss of control. This was the use of it. In the stillness that followed, the house did not react. The walls did not carry memory, but something had ended that could never be restored. A pregnant mother, 2 beautiful children, and a future that included a son who would never be born into the world waiting for him. And then almost immediately, a different kind of action began. A narrative. Within hours, Chris Watts would present himself as a concerned husband. He told authorities that Shanann Watts had left with the children. It sounded simple and familiar, the kind of explanations that buys time because it feels possible. But reality does not bend for long. Investigators began to see the fractures almost immediately. Surveillance footage from a neighbor captured movements that did not align with his account. His timeline shifted when pressed. Details that should have remained consistent did not. As documented in case-related analysis, inconsistencies between his statements and emerging evidence quickly undermined his initial version of events. The story was already breaking. And in court, what followed would be built on statements, timelines, and reconstructed truth, reflecting how the case moved from uncertainty to documented fact. But none of that changes the order of what matters. The investigations came after. The contradictions came after. The trial came after. What came first was silence. The first thing to collapse was not the family. It was the illusion that they were still alive somewhere else. Which begs me to ask this question. How can quote-unquote loving father annihilate his own family? At this point, it is tempting to search for one clean trigger. The affair, the pregnancy, the separation talk, the financial pressure. But research on familicide warns us against simple answers, or maybe asking simple answers. Cases like these are rarely explained by one stressor. Mostly, family mass murders, or FMM, are better understood as a collapse in how the offender sees the family itself. The danger in many familicide cases is not rage alone. Rage can be loud and visible. It can leave signs that people recognize. But in some family annihilation cases, the deeper danger is quieter. It is ownership thinking. The belief that a wife is not fully separate from the husband, that children are not fully separate from the father, that the family is not a group of human beings, but an extension of one man's identity, status, comfort, image, or future. Research on familicide repeatedly returns to this idea. The family becomes tied to the offender's sense of masculinity, control, and personal failure. In some studies, perpetrators may view family members as property and connect their identity to control and power over the family unit. When those factors are threatened, violence can become the offender's distorted attempt to regain control. This is why the word annihilator is so disturbing, because it does not describe a moment of ordinary anger. but because it describes a mindset where the family is no longer treated as a collection of separate lives. In this mindset, the family becomes a structure, a mirror, a possession, a public image, or a future plan. And when that structure begins to collapse, some offenders do not simply leave it, they destroy it. According to studies on familicide and family mass murder, the recurring stressors include relationship issues, divorce or separation, jealousy, domestic violence, financial distress, custody disputes, fear of abandonment, threats to status and family image. In one study, these types of cases were analyzed through motives such as family breakdown, family appearance, financial distress, mental illness, with features like domestic violence, divorce, third-party affairs, custody disputes, substance use, denial, fleeing, and suicidal behavior. However, we do not infer that these are the immediate causes, because stress does not immediately cause or result to murder, nor does separation, infidelity, death, or pregnancy. A collapsing relationship does not immediately cause such instances. Millions of people experience heartbreak, humiliation, rejection, financial strain, and the fear of losing the life they imagined. But they do not resort to taking the lives of their families. So going back to Chris, the question is not anymore what stress was he under. It becomes, what did Chris Watts believe he was entitled to do when that stress came? Because in many familicide cases, the danger is not the pain by itself. Rather, it may be that the pain was shaped into control, shame turned into entitlement, and rejection filtered through ownership. It may also be filtered through the belief that other people's lives can be ended to protect the offender's image, future, or sense of self. In a study by Taylor Othout on family annihilators, the psychological profiles of murderous fathers, 2 new profiles emerge in the FMM offender type, the mentally ill offender and the self-preserving offender. In this article, the self-preserving offender is someone who is triggered by a threat to their individual well-being. In my understanding, this is the type of offender who does not destroy the family because he thinks he cannot live without them. This is the type of offender who destroys the family because he thinks he can live better without the consequences they represent. This is not love or panic in any sense. And this is not just an argument that had gone too far. It is the collapse of morality that's wearing the mask of problem resolution. And I believe it is crucial to bring this distinction up for the Watts case. Because if we only say that Christopher Watts was stressed or that he had a marital issue or that he wanted a new life with his mistress, we may be flattening the horror into something almost understandable. Stress is something part of being human. And what happened here was not mere stress. I guess we'll never know the exact details to its fullest extent. But it might be a decision made inside a distorted hierarchy where Chris's wants, his image, his affair, his escape, and his future were treated as more important than the lives of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. This may be what research is telling us about real danger. That not every dangerous person looks explosive. In the past episodes we've covered, most of the perpetrators do not look like they're capable of what they were convicted of. Brian Mitchell looked spiritual, peculiar and eccentric, yes, but not violent looking. Philip Patrick West looked ordinary. And maybe this is why cases like these are difficult to prevent, because society cannot simply rely on looking for monsters. And sometimes danger is not a monster who announces itself. In this case, it may be a person quietly deciding that the people closest to him have become obstacles. And when we return to Chris Watts through that lens, the question changes. It's not anymore, why didn't he just leave when he could have? It becomes, what did he believe he had the right to erase in order to rewrite his life without them in it? When the focus shifts from what happened to why, evidence begins to point less toward chaos and more toward a disturbing sense of clarity. Research by Taylor Othout and Denise Cullen and Katarina Fritzen does not give us definitive answers, but it offers structured ways to understand how such actions can take shape. In this lens, the act is not best understood as a sudden explosion of rage or a dramatic revenge fantasy. It appears closer to what Othout describes as a self-preserving pattern, a form of familicide in which the offender is triggered by a perceived threat to his own well-being, future, identity, or public image. Othout's study identified this self-preserving profile after reviewing 39 familicide cases in the United States from 2009 to 2019. Noting that these offenders kill to protect themselves, often with little regard for what happens to the family members they destroy. This is important because in a self-preserving framework, the family is not killed because the offender is trying to save them, nor because he is consumed by one uncontrollable emotional rupture. The family becomes, in the offender's distorted logic, a problem. The family becomes a problem to be removed. Othout specifically classifies Christopher Watts under the self-preserving profile, with a listed motive of appearance, and features including avoiding divorce, marrying his mistress, and separation. Cullen and Fritzen's research offers another useful lens through what they call adaptive mode of familicide. In their study of 104 Australian intrafamilial homicide cases, they used multidimensional scaling analysis to identify 4 action modes: expressive, adaptive, integrative, and conservative. The adaptive mode was associated with killings carried out in service of an external goal, where the offender manipulates the environment for instrumental gain rather than acting purely from emotional eruption. This is where the pattern becomes especially disturbing. Cullen and Fritzen describe adaptive cases as involving actions such as affairs, suffocation, unborn victims, hidden bodies, and moved bodies. These cases reflected killings committed in service of an external goal, with a detached relationship to the victims, who were often manipulated after death to deflect attention from the perpetrator. In that context, the crime becomes less about a momentary loss of control and more about a decision to regain control. Cullen and Fritzen write that adaptive offenders often moved, hid, or abandoned victims' bodies, staged scenes, notified police or emergency services after discovering the deaths, and used hands-on methods such as strangling or suffocating. They describe the main goal of adaptive offenders could be best described as an escape. However, that does not mean every detail of the Watts case perfectly fits one academic category. It means that the available evidence can be interpreted through overlapping patterns. Othout's self-preserving offender who destroys the family to protect the self, and Cullen and Fritzen's adaptive mode, where violence serves as an external goal. Together, these frameworks suggest a man not simply overwhelmed by emotion, but oriented toward escape, concealment, and the preservation of a preferred future. This interpretation also helps us avoid a common mistake, assuming that calmness means control in a healthy sense. In this case, calmness may be read as avoidance, compartmentalization, and emotional detachment. Not strength, not mysterious, not brilliance, but a refusal to confront consequences without destroying the people attached to them. What is not strongly supported by these frameworks is the idea that severe mental illness alone explains the crime. OTHA separates self-preserving offenders from mentally ill offenders, defining mentally ill offenders as those primarily driven by serious mental disorder or disability. Watts, in OTHA's classification, is not placed in that mentally ill category, but in the self-preserving category. So I'd like to carefully conclude that yes, these studies do not tell us the exact private and the real reason why Christopher Watts made each choice. No single study can do that. However, empirical studies give us a structured language for what the pattern resembles: self-preservation, instrumental escape, image protection, and the treatment of family members not as independent human beings, but as obstacles to a future he may have wanted more than their lives. This does not require someone to be mentally ill. It does not require someone to be a genius. It only requires a shift in value, a belief, however temporary or distorted, that other lives matter less than one's own desired future. Because the danger is not stress itself. Stress is everywhere. Stress is universal. What turns it lethal is something else. Stress is the pressure, but entitlement shapes the response. Ownership distorts relationship, and dehumanization removes the barrier. That is where the risk begins. Now, could this have been prevented? This is the question every case like this leaves behind. It's not because we're looking for someone else to blame, but because prevention is the only moral lesson to keep looking at darkness this closely. So let's be clear. This is not the part where we say Shanann should have known. It's not the part where we say her friend should have stopped it, or her neighbor should have seen it, or that pregnancy should have protected her, Bella, Cece, and Nico from violence. And it is not the part where we shift responsibility onto the affair partner. I believe that's another case entirely. Even though her presence may have somehow forced Chris to do what he did, but again, it's another case that could be talked about. Just tell me if you want to have that case on another episode. But anyway, the responsibility belongs to the person who chose murder, which is Chris Watts. But rejecting the victim blame does not mean rejecting prevention. Rejecting the victim blame means learning the right lessons. Because danger does not always come with shouting, police records and blotters, broken furniture, or visible bruises. Sometimes danger hides behind passivity. Sometimes it may look like emotional withdrawal. Sometimes it starts telling lies. Sometimes it smiles for the camera, answering questions calmly, while behind everything, escape is being planned at someone else's expense. That is one of the most unsettling lessons of this case. Because most people expect that calm is equal to absolute safety, that cooperation is completely harmless. A soft voice does not mean that someone is kind-spirited. And sometimes what looks like composure is not peace. Apparently, those can also mean avoidance, concealment, and image management that's wearing a clean shirt. So, could this have been prevented? Maybe not in the simple way that people want or expect. Real life rarely gives us warning signs with red circles around them. Friends are not detectives. Neighbors are not threat assessment teams. And families are not mind readers. And victims living inside a relationship do not experience it And victims living inside a relationship do not experience it as a documentary timeline with ominous music playing underneath. Hindsight makes patterns look obvious. On the other hand, while in the moment, they are often scattered, confusing, and painfully ordinary. But there are lessons that society can take seriously. We can get better at teaching people that domestic danger is not limited to explosive rage, coercive control, emotional detachment, sudden withdrawal, image obsession, separation stress, pregnancy vulnerability, and fear of exposure can all matter. Not because they always lead to violence, they usually do not, but because in some cases, those pressures can become dangerous when filtered through entitlement, ownership, and the belief that other people are obstacles. We can also respond more seriously when a disappearance story does not make sense. Like contradictions matter, missing phones, abandoned cars, unexplained silence, strange timelines, and a partner who seems oddly detached should not be brushed aside just because there's no dramatic scene. That a calm story can still be a false story. And we can build stronger support around the moments when risk often increases, such as separation, pregnancy, financial crisis, custody conflict, infidelity exposure, and the collapse of a carefully managed public image. These are not excuses for violence. They are pressure points when prevention systems should become more alert, not more passive. The hard truth may be this. We may never know whether one different intervention could have saved Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico. That kind of certainty belongs to fantasy, not investigation. Despite that, we can still learn from what their demise reveals. Prevention begins when we stop looking only for monsters who roar and start paying attention to the one who disappear emotionally, rewrite reality quietly, and treat human beings as problems to solve. Because sometimes the danger is not the man who looks out of control. Sometimes it is the man who looks completely calm. In November 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again live freely outside the consequences of what he had done. The court could name the crime. It could assign the punishment. It could remove him from society. In that legal sense, justice was obtained as far as the system allowed. But this is where justice begins to show its limits. Because justice can punish a murderer, but it cannot reverse a mourning that never should have happened. It cannot reopen the front door and let Shanann walk back into her home. It cannot restore the sound of Bella and Cece moving through their rooms, asking questions, playing, laughing, needing snacks, needing bedtime stories, needing tomorrow. It cannot let Nico be born into the life that was already waiting for him. A sentence can contain a person. It can declare guilt. It can protect the public from further harm. But it cannot rebuild what was lost. And maybe that is the cruelest part of cases like this. The legal ending feels final on paper. But grief does not end where the court record ends. For the people who loved Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico, the sentence did not restore the future. It only confirmed the absence. There would be no more school mornings, no birthdays growing older, no little arguments in the kitchen, no family photos that aged with time, no ordinary chaos of children becoming themselves, no chance for Shanann to keep becoming who she was becoming. That is why justice matters. But sadly, it may not be enough. Justice matters because guilt must be named. It matters because accountability must exist. Justice matters because a society that cannot condemn the destruction of a family has lost something essential. But justice is not resurrection. It cannot give Bella the years she was owed. It cannot let Cece become older than 3. It cannot place Nico in his mother's arms. It cannot return Shanann to the future that was stolen from her. So when we talk about justice in the Watts family murders, we should not confuse punishment with healing. The legal case ended. The moral wound did not. In cases like this, there is a temptation to study the killer until he becomes the main character. Unintentionally, yes. To ask how he thought, why he lied, whether he felt remorse, what kind of monster he was. Those questions can matter. They can help understand patterns, warning signs, motives, and prevention. But if we are not careful, they can also become a second theft, because this home once held something more important than a murder. It held Shanann, a mother with routines, hopes, friendships, frustrations, ambition, and a future she was still building. It held Bella, a little girl remembered for her sensitivity, her awareness, her small voice asking if others were okay. It held Cece, a child moving through rooms like a storm of joy, loud with life, impossible to reduce to a crime scene. And it held Nico, a baby who had not yet arrived but was already part of the story, already named, already imagined, already loved. When we remember only the man who ended them, we help complete the theft. So maybe the most ethical way to end this story is not by giving him the final word, not by asking whether he was evil enough, cold enough, broken enough, or remorseful enough, but by returning to the people whose lives were taken. Shanann should have had more mornings. Bella should have had more years. Cece should have had celebrated more birthdays. Nico should have had his first breaths. And the rest of us should be left with something heavier than curiosity. We should be left with responsibility. Because justice can answer after the harm is done, but prevention asks us to look earlier, more carefully, and honestly. Not with suspicion toward every quiet person. Not with blame toward victims, friends, neighbors, or families. But with a clear understanding that danger does not always announce itself with shouting. Sometimes it withdraws, it smiles, and sometimes it shows normalcy so well that everyone believes the house is still safe. Until it is not. And that may be the haunting question this case leaves behind. How many dangers wear the face of normalcy until the people closest to them pay the price?